Hi everyone, I'm Dan Carmel. I'll be speaking today about learning JavaScript and building a side project in 6 months. So just a little bit more about me. I'm the VP of Strategy in OMD Israel. I have about 7 years of experience in growth, marketing, media strategy, and advertising. I'm also a hobbyist developer, which is a large part of today's talk. I build projects and I write about technical marketing in my own website, tshape.io, and I also write for Conversion Excel and Hacker Noon. There's another thing I want you to know about me, and that's that I build tools that I think are cool or helpful for marketers, meaning this is not a talk about my first 1 million users or how I got rich. This is a talk about the process of becoming self-sufficient and making new ideas happen. And this is all I want to talk about today. So let's start by saying that in my opinion, all of those great ideas of yours can become a reality. And I say that because I've been where you are and I've been where most people are. And I know that you can learn the things that are required to actually build your own projects. So let me start off with a short story. For years, I used to keep all of my great ideas in a notes app, in my iPhone's notes app. Every time I had a new idea, I would write it down, thinking, okay, let's start by basically sketching off the idea and see where it goes. But after a day or so, I'd forget all about it and move on to the next idea. And this way, I just have like my notes app has become a graveyard of great ideas. So some of these ideas were a content research app that lets you find about 100 top blogs, influencers, or authors on any field and download the list as a CSV. Another idea was a product hunt scraper where you provide it with a product hunt link and it scrapes all of your upvoters, enriches it with Twitter data, and sends you the list back. Another idea of mine was a Zapier integration for Notion. Notion doesn't have an official API, so I thought it'd be cool if I found a way to plug Zapier into Notion and give people access to all sorts of new integrations. But there was this one idea that actually I kept coming back to. It never stopped bugging me. And that was a CRO platform that instead of being focused on A/B testing, was focused on bandit testing. And by bandit testing, I mean, instead of running A/B tests that startups and small businesses don't have enough traffic to actually do correctly, you'd run bandit tests that optimize from the first moment that you put the test, that you upload the test. And this is something that I really wanted to build, and I thought it'd be pretty cool and would have a meaningful impact on a lot of businesses. But the more I thought about it, I kind of sketched the user flow. I designed the app. I thought about the onboarding. I made a deck for it. And the more I thought of it, I realized that this is a pretty big project. And this is something that I will not be able to do with my current skill set. So I said, enough is enough. I'm going to learn JavaScript. And pretty soon after I started learning JavaScript, I was able to start basically building all these ideas that I had in my notes app. One after the other, I was able to look at these ideas and say, okay, this is something that I can actually build. And now, if you look at my own site at the tshape.io, you can see that the product hunt scraper that I talked about earlier and the content research app are already there. I built them. I also built the Notion integration, and it's also publicly available on my site. So yeah, pretty soon you'll be able to start looking at these ideas and say, okay, I think I can make this happen. But I still couldn't build Bandit. And the reason was that Bandit was a pretty complicated platform. It wasn't this one function type of app where you input this keyword and you get a list back. It was an actual platform with a lot of complicated aspects. And the more I learned about code, the more I realized how complicated it is. And I realized that I need to develop another set of skills. And that skill set was outsourcing. My thinking was, if I learn how to code and I know how to code well, and meanwhile, I also kind of practice on how I can optimize my relationships with freelancers, I'd be able to build projects faster and to basically split the workload while I'm actually off doing work and earning money. So after a few months of working with Upwork and kind of learning how to do this well, I was actually able to build Bandit, and it's not a complete app, obviously. It's just in a kind of an MVP, but it's already live, and if any of you guys want to check it out, just contact me and I'll give you access to the platform. So what I want to talk to you about today is how you can actually make this the same kind of process happen, maybe quicker, because I spent a lot of time trying different things to actually learn what works and what doesn't, and I want to save you the time of doing that. I actually want to suggest a pretty simple way of how you can learn both JavaScript and outsourcing without actually spending a lot of time on doing research on what's the ideal way to learn it. So basically what I'm going to show you now is a way for you to learn both pretty quickly, just by following the same kind of structure. So as I said, there are two building blocks. You need to learn JavaScript and you need to learn outsourcing. The reason you need to learn JavaScript is because by learning JavaScript, you'll be able to work way better with these freelancers. If you don't know any code, it's going to be really hard for you to explain to developers what you want out of a project, and it's very unlikely that you'll be able to build something well. And you need to learn outsourcing because that's the way that you can tap into the global pool of talent and get high quality results in a low cost. Now let's start by discussing how I think you could learn JavaScript pretty quickly. And this is based on my own trial and error and things that I've learned in the process. So first off, let's discuss why JavaScript. I assume that some of you are thinking, why not Python, for example? And the answer is that you can learn whatever you want, but JavaScript is the most versatile programming language for web applications, and that's a fact. With JavaScript, you can basically build the entire app using one language, and I'll show you why. So this concept that I'm going to explain in a minute might be familiar to some of you, but I'll still dive a bit deeper into it because I think it's really important to understand. So JavaScript, that you can see at the top here as vanilla JavaScript, is a programming language that's very abundant on the web. Every interactive action that you perform on the web is made using JavaScript. But at the same time, in the last few years, JavaScript has become much more robust with front-end and back-end frameworks. And front-end frameworks like React, Vue, or Angular allow you to create more dynamic applications without learning a completely different language. At the same time, Node is a backend framework for JavaScript that allows you to actually run JavaScript not on the browser, but on the server, meaning you can build an entire application, an entire backend application using JavaScript. You can build a server, an API, you can create web scraping bots, automation, query databases, all within the same language that you've learned, which is JavaScript. And by learning this ecosystem, you can actually create anything you want using one language, which is super important, because if you spend time learning something, you might as well learn something that covers all bases and lets you build anything that you want. So let's start off by discussing how I think you can learn JavaScript pretty quickly. I've tried so many tutorials and so many ways, and I think that at some point I realized what works best, and I want to save you the time of doing the same process by just giving you like a pretty specific schedule that you can follow and specific materials that you can follow to learn it as quickly as possible. So the first thing you need to understand is that you have to make time. There's no learning anything without making time, but more specifically, when you want to learn code, you have to be very persistent in terms of scheduling the learning time and the practice time. So the first thing, you have to practice every day. You can't skip any practice. You need to practice for 15 to 30 minutes every day. This will help you kind of build the memory structures that you need to actually start thinking like a developer and understanding the logics. The second thing is learning. You have to learn at least once a week, at least for 4 hours. So the 4 hours is the minimum weekly learning time. Obviously, you can do more, but this is the minimum. You can split it into 2 sessions or do one session per week. And the third thing is you need to kind of find ways to understand the jargon and learn more about the world of JavaScript in general, and like kind of expand your your knowledge. And to do that, I recommend podcasts. I recommend podcasts on your daily commute, at least twice a week. The second part of learning JavaScript is about finding the right resources. You can spend about a month or two just doing research about which is the best tutorial, for example. But I decided to save you the trouble of doing all that and just give you a complete list of what you need to learn so you can drill down today. So for practice, I recommend free Codecamp. That's a practice site. This is like they have exercises for each person and for each level. So you can just go in, and if you don't know anything about HTML, for example, then you start with HTML, then you go to CSS and JavaScript. If you know a lot of HTML and CSS, you can go ahead and start with the first JavaScript exercises and just go ahead from there. Do exercises for 15 to 30 minutes a day. Regarding learning, I recommend Moshe Hamedani's courses in this order. You start with the JavaScript basics course, then object-oriented programming in JavaScript, then mastering React, and then the complete Node.js course. These tutorials are amazing and they're cheap. And I think that if you just follow through learning each one on your own time, you'll be able to learn everything you need to build anything you want. If you want to diversify from time to time, you can also do the Codecademy courses. Regarding podcasts, I recommend one specific podcast, which is Syntax. Syntax is an amazing podcast. You pretty much can listen to any one of their episodes and learn something new. And if you have additional time, you can also check out YouTube tutorials and just expand your horizons in fun function and in Wes Boss and Scott Olinsky's channel. Scott Olinsky's channel is called Level Up Tuts, and Wes Boss's channel is just Wes Boss. And you can just go ahead and learn more JavaScript using these channels. If you follow this method and just do daily practice and learn once a week in using these specific sources, I guarantee that if you just persist, you'll soon enough be able to build your own apps. But to build a complicated app, you have to do more than that, and you need to learn how to use outsource and how to use freelancers. So now let's go into how you can actually leverage outsourcing. So first off, I'd like you to meet Tal Florentin. Tal Florentin is a friend of mine. He's the CEO of Samurai. And one day we sat down for coffee and I told him about me learning JavaScript and how I'm trying to build my own things. And he looked at me and said, listen, man, I've built the entire Samurai infrastructure, the entire Samurai app using Upwork. And he just gave me this list of great tips. He's also a bit technical, but at the same time, he's a designer. He's not a programmer. And just give me a list of tips that I can use to successfully manage Upwork freelancers. And I ran home basically and started and uploaded my first project. And I haven't looked back since. So after a lot of experimentation, here are my main takeaways on how to save yourself time and money when it comes to Upwork. So the first thing I'd like to suggest is to plan your milestones. Don't improvise. You need to plan and define your milestones and your project as far into the future as you can. I understand that you can't always think all the way through, but it's important that you kind of understand what you want to get out of every project and how long and how much effort would it take to get there. The second thing is choosing the right freelancer, which I'll discuss in a minute. And the third thing is to always constantly be prepared for getting ditched by your freelancer. So let's start off by discussing how you could plan your milestones. So before hiring a freelancer, you first need to plan your project. And to do that, there are 4 main steps. So the first thing you need is to decide what the goal is, what the outcome of the project should be. After you define the scope of the project, basically, you need to decide how much are you willing to pay to get that result. So whatever project you're thinking of, okay, how much is it worth to me? After you decide on that, you need to plan every milestone that it would take to get there. And what exactly needs to happen? What do you need to build to get the desired project? And you need to split it into these pieces that you can explain to a developer. And the fourth thing you need to do is to assign a cost to each one of these milestones. So you need to take the total budget, say, I don't know, $150, and to split it into each milestone according to how complicated and how hard to create it's going to be. Then eventually just reduce 30% of the cost of each one of these milestones for unplanned milestones, because you will have a lot of unplanned things coming up as you progress. The second thing you need to take into account is how to choose the right freelancer. Obviously, you want to choose someone that's low cost, but also highly skilled and competent and gives you feedback and is really communicative and quick to respond. And all of these things, you could say that it's impossible to find someone who fits all of these criteria, but I think that you can. And the reason is that I did find some amazing freelancers at Upwork, on Upwork. And here is how I did it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to hire people who are entry level. Don't hire experienced developers because they cost a lot of money. And what you want to do is you need to find the talented new freelancer. So the first thing, hire entry level programmers. The second thing you want to do is use a fixed price per milestone pricing model. So Upwork has two pricing models. You can either choose to use fixed price per milestone, so how much is this milestone worth to you, or you can pay for a freelance hour. And honestly, I don't know how to plan a project based on hourly rates because I don't know how long it's supposed to take to a developer. So I prefer to use fixed price per milestone. The third thing you need is you need to write an insanely detailed technical direct offer. So when you write your description for the milestone, you need to make sure that you describe the entire scope of the project, all the skills that are required, the tech stack that you prefer. So if you want to build something using React and Node, you have to specify which type of libraries you want to use. Everything that you've learned while learning JavaScript should go here, and basically you need to just explain exactly what you want and what the result should look like. And this will save you a lot of trouble in the future. Here's another quick tip that I've learned from Tal about the first milestone. So say your first milestone is worth $150 to you. What he recommended is splitting it into three. So basically $50 and finding 3 freelancers who are willing to work for the third of the cost. After you do that and you find 3 freelancers willing to work for $50, you pay each one $50 to complete the project, and you compare the 3 results. You find the best performing freelancer and you work with that freelancer until the quality of work starts decreasing. And the reason that's a great idea is because you find someone who is willing to work for a very low cost compared to your ideal cost, meaning you have a large margin where you can increase the payment as time goes by. You should also give that person a pretty big bonus after he finishes the first milestone, so that he's more loyal and he's more willing to work for you in the future. The third thing I want to discuss is staying prepared for getting ditched. And this is a given. When you work with platforms such as Upwork and you want to work with new freelancers who are willing to do the work for a pretty low cost, they're bound to leave you at some point. For people who are willing to pay more, after you give them some reviews, you and other employers, they're bound to go to higher paying employers. So the first thing you need to remember is to always request readable code with clear comments. It's important that you make sure that the code that they write is always very readable and very clear, so that if you need to switch to another programmer, it would be pretty easy for him to just continue where they left off. The second thing you need to remember is to always request modular code that can easily be used in different contexts. And by modular code, I mean that all of the code should be wrapped in functions, should be easily moved from one project to the other. Basically, don't write the entire thing as one chunk of code. This is the main point. And the third point is always require consistent naming conventions across the entire project. So make sure that the naming conventions from one freelancer to the other remain the same, that they write in the same way, and that they understand how the project is designed and how the project is named. And the third and last point is to remember to ask for documentation. If the project has more than 1 or 2 milestones, then it needs to be documented. There needs to be a documentation that basically explains how people should approach this project. And this will make it very easy for one developer to work on a project that he never worked on before. So these are basically the points. This is what you need to know about Upwork and about JavaScript to start. And the last thing I want to discuss is basically how to maneuver between the two so that you'll be able to do it in a few months. So the idea basically is you start by learning JavaScript for about a couple of months. You learn the basics. Again, with the tutorials that I showed you before, you just learn the 2 first courses about JavaScript, about plain JavaScript. And afterwards, you start uploading projects to Upwork. You create these projects on Upwork, starting with small projects and going larger and larger as time goes by. And while you upload projects to Upwork, you should also start learning the frameworks. Learn React or Angular or whatever you want. And at the same time, learn Node, which is super important. And just maneuver between the two. So learn Upwork, learn JavaScript on your free time, and also manage these Upwork freelancers and find great freelancers. So in a month or two, you'll be able to find really good quality freelance workers that could work on your next projects and successfully build the projects of your dreams. So this is the project basically, and this is how you can spend about 6 months learning JavaScript and Upwork and actually build something and get some results. I hope that this helps. If you need any help, if you want to talk about your coding journey, if you want to try my testing platform, just contact me at dan@tshaped.io. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Bye-bye.